Welcome to the Visiting Writers Reading Series. This is the first event this semester. We've had the Visiting Writers Reading Series for now 12 years. And that's thanks to the support of the College of Arts and Sciences and the English department. So today our guest is Megan Volpert. She's the author of 7 books on communication and popular culture, including 2 Lambda Literary Award finalists. So I thought I would explain what is the Lambda Literary Award. These awards are awarded yearly by the US-based Lambda Literary Foundation to published works which celebrate or explore LGBT themes. The categories include humor, romance, and biography. So Megan Volpert's most recent work is 1976, and many of you either have read this book, which is a collection of essays, or will, since we had a few brand new, a few extra ones. I'm sorry, and then we also are selling a few books over there. She has been teaching high school English in Atlanta for a decade and was 2014 Teacher of the Year. In fact, when she came here, she told me, well, a few of my students are students here now, and so they're going to come. They said they were going to come to the event. She edited the American Library Association honored anthology, This Assignment is So Gay, LGBTIQ Poets on the Art of Teaching. So without further ado, let's welcome Megan Volpert.
Now I'm so much more accustomed to reading in bars than in classrooms. So if you get the urge to clap, laugh, make weird faces at me, that's cool. I'm much more accustomed to that than people doing this. Much more so, okay? I thought we may as well read a bunch from October, because that's what time it is, right? Here are 3 sections of October, and then I'll go back and read a little about April. The first Friday in October, Jimmy Carter celebrated his birthday by backpedaling from the lust in his heart that he had confessed to Playboy and interviewed the magazine released for its November issue a full month early in order to get out ahead of Election Day. Ford celebrated Carter's birthday by finally displaying enough lust for the office to take part in his own campaigning, lest he fall behind on the big day for actually getting elected to that same office. He immediately did, in fact, fall behind by tanking their second debate together, during which the American people decided they prefer a candidate with a simple heart to one that does not acknowledge threats posed by the Soviet Union. 5 years later, my mother would celebrate Carter's debate victory by giving birth to me. On the following Friday, EMI officially signed the Sex Pistols. There was a full moon. ABBA attempted to thwart the punk revolution by launching Arrival midweek, and in fact succeeded in turning basically everyone who was not protected by a black t-shirt into a dancing queen. On the third Friday, nobody watched the first ever vice presidential debate because everybody was watching the Yankees kill it in overtime against the Kansas City Royals in their epic 5-game brouhaha. Down the street from the stadium and watching every minute of it at home on Ocean Parkway, just across the block from my future wife, in fact, mafioso mastermind Carlo Gambino was so pleased with the performance of his beloved Yankees that he celebrated their entry into the World Series by dying of a heart attack, much to the chagrin of the assorted, unsavory neighboring familias that had been plotting to kill him. 1 week later, as the Yankees are suffering their 4th and fatal defeat in a terrific sweep by the Cincinnati defending championship Reds, Rolling Stone launched issue number 224, Richard Avedon's 73 political portraits of the family. This yearbook cost 85 cents at the time, little more than a penny per photo to round up the savviest, most moving, shakiest bunch of polls in modern American history. What depth, what excitement to see all those faces of powerful people who'd rather be caught with a hand in the cookie jar than be stripped down to the white paper backdrop, facing the firing squad of one allegedly apolitical photographer. And of course, you could look at a couple of Bee Gees albums covers to find out about the fashion of the period, or you could round up this bunch of drunken stalwarts and see what their publicists advise they dress up in when some hippie cats from Rolling Stone send over Andy Warhol's favorite photographer for, you know, just a quick sesh between bouts of concocting those nefarious deeds that ruin our country into something great. Two full-size, side-by-side portraits of Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford. You want to look, between them instead of at them. Ford placed an American flag poking out of the left side of the frame between them, dividing them. One's got a dark suit, one's got a light suit. Both of them are faintly checked just for texture. It's a black and white photo op. Both of them have ties with wacky patterns. Ford's has what looks like a group of 3 tiny soldiers, maybe drummer boys or something, marching across his dark tie, and Carter has an oddly striped, weirdly embroidered, 2-colored, I don't know, frankly. Carter is just looking nice. Ford is going full bore on the whole symbolism of things. Both of them part their hair on the right side of their head. Jerry does not have nearly as much of it to part as Jimmy does, and neither of them bothers with smiling. Not in the eyes, not in the mouth. Ford looks like, frankly, he's ready to sprint into action. He's got one eyelid slightly droopy, whereas Carter looks just a touch sad or concerned. Maybe that he's shitting himself a little bit. Carter's collar is significantly more in the right place, not of his tie reasonably proportionate. Ford, not so much. Ford's a little more disheveled. Carter's got his right hand in his pocket. Ford has both hands at his sides. Both of them are just looking right at you. Wide peak lapels on both sides. 1-button suit on Ford, 2-button suit on Carter. Carter gets the left side of the page. Ford gets the right side of the page. Oh, the choices we'll make. Decisions. Decisions. I've had a wool coat quest on the back burner for quite a while now. I acquired a terrifically rugged, double-breasted navy blue peacoat a few years ago. It's from the 90s, and frankly, it looks it. As far as things like fit, length, lapel, I can wear it well, but it's not, totally the perfect thing. So I have been on the lookout for a better, more modern parallel. This involves trying on a cornucopia of options, but it's not easy to find the right coat. This would be good for just, riding in a car, heading into the winter with a good thick scarf for business or fancy-like occasions with a shiny pair of wingtips. It has to be a little bit professional and dashing, maybe even something a politician would wear. Sometimes there are excruciating but slightly entertaining days when I'm more of a politician than a sailor. So there I was, in the discount place, overheating with all the inadequacies of overabundant choice, when I happened to pass a coat that calmly reached out from the rack to metaphorically flick me on the back of the ear. It danced, annoyingly, magnetically, in the corner of my field of vision. I knew instantly I must try it on, and as soon as it crested my shoulders, I knew immediately that I would buy it. I knew this before I rounded the bend of the rack to look at myself in the mirror. It didn't have to look right, although it absolutely did. It had to feel right, and damn did it meet me where I was at on that score, without reserve. This wasn't a coat for once in a while, it was a coat for every day. It has all the things, and bear in mind that I am an all-weather biker, so that is a lot of very unusual things. It has side hand pockets that are reinforced slits with no zippers, so I don't have to take my gloves off to unzip my pockets before shoving my hands in there to get warm. I can just shove them in, gloves and all, for double warmth without stretching out the pocket seams. It has an inner fleece lining with its own secondary zipper, so the cold from my 60-mile-per-hour wind doesn't bleed into my chest through the coat's front zipper too quickly. It's got a left sleeve zipped pocket that is a great place to keep my iPod and earpods, but it also has a pocket inside the jacket actually dedicated to MP3 players that includes a buttonhole to thread my earbuds through, ensuring that after my ride, when I put on those little plastic nuggets into my ears, they are not freezing from the wind either. It's got a cavernous hood, cavernous, that zips off if I get tired of it. That meanwhile protects me from both wind and precipitation once my helmet is off and the bike is parked. It's got 2 thick collars, one from the inner fleece layer that comes up like a mock turtleneck. Okay, mock turtleneck. And another on the outer layer that rises to my chin. It hits me at the right place on the hips without squeezing them or riding up. It is a beautifully crafted gray bomber jacket. And of course, it takes the business of waterproofing very, very, very seriously. It is a modern, science-riddled, urban, textile coat that will replace my current winter riding coat. A coat that is highly expensive, extremely high-performing, pro snowboarding jacket that I found in an obscure corner of the internet. It has been serving me faithfully for many years, and I never dreamed that I'd find an upgrade, so I never even really looked for one. But it made me look like a fucking suburban soccer mom. Suburban soccer mom. And it was clearly sending a message that I was trying very hard to sacrifice fashion for function. The sudden appearance of this new gray bomber jacket provoked me into a major realization about my personhood, which is this. I am not a person who wears wool coats. I am a person who wears textile coats. I do not like to wear trendy things unless they are first, cleanly useful to me, and secondly, comfortably usable to me. Only then am I in the mood to entertain the prospect of fashion-forward clothing. Wool generally gets wet, and it stays that way, and it doesn't breathe, and it gets bent out of shape, or the fabric piles, and it needs dry cleaning. I am not into any of that, and I don't think I'm alone on that either. To paraphrase a great bit about torture from a children's book turned cult favorite movie, we are men of action. Wool coats do not become us. All my life, I have been given to understand that it is trouble to be judging a book by its cover. And truly, I have easily agreed with that sentiment there, but the truth is also this. You can judge most motherfuckers by their coats. So that's a bunch of October. I actually go through every single one of the 78 portraits in that edition of Rolling Stone, and they're crazy and interesting, but I'm not gonna do 20 minutes on fashion photography for you, right? I'm gonna show you something else. So this is a piece from the June chapter, not the April chapter, I'm wrong about that. The June chapter, which I thought is good for reminding you what school is for, in case you have forgotten. Probably you haven't forgotten, but just in case, all right? It is Wednesday, the 16th of June, and the kids are getting ready for school as the sun comes up over Soweto. They're walking to a place from whence thousands of them are already preparing to walk away. They will get up, out of their little desks, these teenagers trying to keep calm through the rage that has been building steadily inside of them for so long, and rally all their friends to leave school with them, walking toward Orlando Stadium. The police block the main road, so they take another. At the end of this road, German shepherds with froth dripping off their incisors and a volley of gunshots. Somewhere around 15,000 high school kids with no prompting from the Ramones or Joan Jett or the Sex Pistols up and organized themselves into a protest against the adoption of the language of their oppressors in their schools. They held up signs saying that the students would be pleased to learn Afrikaans if the Prime Minister would first please learn Zulu. If you ask me, that's fair as hell. They threw rocks and they set things, the dogs, on fire. One of the cops fired off a shot and 176 people were killed. Many more students made it to the hospitals. The hospital administrators were informed by the police that doctors were expected to hand over the names of anyone with a bullet wound that day. Not one of the doctors complied, instead listing all of the bullet holes as abscesses. Word choice saves lives. The law looks over those charts and it sees nothing. I'll never understand where the Netherlands acquired a reputation for neutrality. You'd have to really be asleep at the wheel to drift into that version of history. This is a country that spent 400 years pillaging almost every coastal metropolis in Asia, plus the east side of South America, pissing on Cape Town between rounds. So this trouble of what language the teenagers grow up under apartheid would speak is not simple trouble. It is the whole Megillah. 3 days later, on a Saturday, the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 392 in specific support of the students. Chief organizer Stephen Biko is as punk as any punk ever was, and upon lighting the match in Soweto, countless young black South Africans put their feet up next to the blaze, content to let the country burn rather than put a Dutch tongue in their collective mouth. So the question is whether driving Daddy's car is really the best way to smash his garage door down. It's uncertain whether Joan Jett will ever be truly embraced as a guitar god. It's uncertain about whether adopting Afrikaans would have led South Africa toward a more bloodless end to apartheid. This is about the essential purpose of communication. In every alien encounter movie ever, the first order of business is to convey that you come in peace. But that's never really the truth, is it? The truth is that we strive to be vigilant in those moments, on the lookout for anything obscene. You come in civility, masquerading as peace, until such time it becomes clear that you are not dooming yourself to submission in a hostile takeover, and then you have faked peace until you have made it. On the other hand, if the alien is determined to indeed possess evil intention toward your well-being, you have faked peace until such time as you're able to effectively make war that preserves your independence. Cherry bombs away. A dog may not actually be sleeping when you decide to let it lie. The UN resolution was adopted by consensus, but there is no record of the vote count and thusly no official American position on the issue of Soweto. Ford was busy with the situation in Lebanon. On the same day as the riots in Soweto, newly minted U.S. Ambassador Francis E. Malloy Jr. was on his way to formally present his credentials in Beirut. He never made it. Lebanon was at the beginnings of having a bit of a civil war issue, and when Malloy crossed the Green Line going west from Christian turf into Muslim sector, he was abducted and shot by members of the second largest flank of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Major bummer, except that it was perhaps the last time Syria and Israel agreed upon anything. Ford called Kissinger at 9:30 that morning, and Henry kept him waiting for a half hour before speaking to him for 4 minutes. They met with the Veep and the CIA an hour before lunch. By 4 p.m., he released a 3-minute statement concerning the assassination. He said nothing about Soweto. Immediately afterward, he spent 20 minutes talking to 900 high school kids on a Government in Action youth tour. These were rural kids from 8 countries and 23 different states, just wanting to see what the White House was up to while getting a pat on the back for being agriculturally inclined. Ford spent the evening with Prime Minister Trudeau, who presented him with Canada's big bicentennial gift, a bilingual photographic essay collection about life on the border between the two countries. Eyes and ears, people, then step lively. Ford spent 11 minutes in the pool before bedtime because, I guess, no matter the international scene, there's evidently always time for a quick dip. The next morning, he passed an executive order directing the flag at all U.S. embassies to be flown at half-mast. He also met with some elementary school kids for 5 minutes so they could present him with a birthday card for the nation. And then 25 minutes with some high school students who were there for the 8th annual Teenage Republican Leadership Conference. The number of students attending was ballparked at 174. That is 2 less than the number of students that were killed the day before in Soweto. No worries, 15 minutes in the pool before dinner. On Saturday, Resolution 392 is passed while Ford is at the ambassador's funeral. He speaks for 5 minutes and later spent 17 minutes in the pool. During most of this week, Ford is also taking between 1 and 7 minutes to go to his doctor's office at both the beginning and the end of the day. 1 and 7 minutes to go to the doctor's office between the beginning and the end of his day. Blink and you'll miss it. During the week in between the advent of Joan Jett and the dissolution of Soweto, a boy from Syracuse, New York, won the 49th annual Scripps Spelling Bee. His final word was narcolepsy. And the Ramones. The force of the Ramones was never in the unique personalities of each performer, but in their collective commitment to maintaining a unified front in the face of overwhelming social... what? I am lacking a noun that can adequately convey the slight but deeply pressurized boredom that accompanies the expectancies of life in duplexes and cul-de-sac outside of the metropolis. The Ramones were not bad kids. They were like me, fed up with the parental, squirrely for anything resembling adventure, willing to enjoy ostracism, safe in the knowledge that their fate was to be rocketed beyond the sad futures that passed for success in their peer group. If you liked the Ramones in 1976, at first you stood alone with the other loners. Then eventually, everybody got on board for what the band had to offer. And the good news was that if you loved them early, you could still love them long, despite their explosion of popularity. For, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I set before you this proposal for posterity's understanding of early punk rock. The Ramones were not sellouts. The Ramones became a corporate juggernaut precisely because they never, ever, ever deviated from the band's original mission. They seamlessly shuffled new members in and out. They toured psychotically extensively for over 20 years. They released very many albums that all sound roughly, frankly, the same. Just draw a straight line from Judy as a punk to Susie as a headbanger to Sheena as a punk rocker, and a little later, for a more narrative arc, to I want to be sedated and I'm affected and this business is killing me. The Ramones did not evolve, ever. They personally grew old and gray and sick and cantankerous, but did not condone or experiment with adulthood in the image they presented to their rabid public. The Ramones never broke their collective character, and therefore they do not meet any reasonable definition of selling out. This continuous performance of the Ramones as a coadunation of grizzled teenage soul is so unimpeachable, so thoroughly curated, so perfectly glossy, I even feel a little bad discussing it in the past tense. The Ramones have great mileage. They built their machine and they maintained it vigilantly for longer than any other band attempting to set foot and defend ground in the ballpark of what ultimately became punk rock. Hey, ho, let's go! And everybody formed a straight line behind them, the kids proceeding to lose their minds at a tempo as fast as the speediest pop songs anyone had ever heard, at least since Buddy Holly. The Ramones were greatly invested in nostalgic comparisons to 50s rebels, even though they were propelling turnover on a new teenage consciousness so quick that it verged on violence, unleashed on the alien land of the grown-ups like so many hilarious monsters endorsed by the band's affinity for B-movies. We could talk about the album, how it was composed or recorded, what the songs mean, but that is still all beside the point. The lyrics and the noise are but two components of this band's brand. As far as my personal pantheon of music heroes, sprung as it was from the outer reaches of the seventh circle of suburban hell, those words and instruments are smallish compared to the deafening volume with which the image on the cover of their debut album spoke to me. The point is that the totality of this enterprise that is the Ramones embodies an approach to the very concept of youth in a manner that remains undeniably effective, frozen as it is in the homogeneous amber of that iconic debut photograph, a portrait of American life that makes their idea ageless and therefore invincible. You got questions? I got answers. I don't have any answers. I will answer your questions with more questions.
Yes,
Texas.
Why was Ford in the pool so much?
I wasn't there, man. The beauty of being the president, the beauty and terror of being the president is that there's a person who is assigned to keep a diary for you for every single day that you're in office. Every hour of your life is accounted for by someone who is not you. And all of these are publicly available documents. You can go online and just look up the complete what Ford did when he was in the Oval Office, the complete what Clinton did when he was in the Oval Office, the complete anybody you want. It's there, freely available. So I started reading it, and then after a while, it's super boring, and it's also like oddly interesting in ways such as like, why does this dude always go to the pool at night? And sometimes it's for 5 minutes, and maybe the person who's assigned to do the diary is like covering for whatever is really taking place in those 5 minutes, but probably he is just doing 6 laps and then getting out and going to sleep, And that's just strange to think about presidents who also have to be people, and even if they can only carve out like 5 minutes or 7 minutes or whatever, he was a devotee of swimming. So I just thought that was I mean, he's kind of known for being like an excellent football player. That was part of his reputation prior to being an elected official. And so the swimming choice was weird, but I guess you don't exactly like go out to the front lawn and throw a football around at 8 o'clock or something. So I guess so. I guess so. You got your own answer there. Okay, high school? Yeah, I've been in Fulton County for 11 years. I taught at what became Fulton Science Academy High School, and then I taught at Independence High School, which is like a second chance type high school, a little smaller, and I've been at Roswell for quite a while now, up in the North Burbs. Mm-hmm.
Who was the thin white duke?
Who was the thin white duke? David Bowie. David Bowie is the thin white duke. Who is David Bowie is a much larger question than I feel like fully prepared to answer for myself or others. David Bowie was a musical mastermind who produced some of the best punk rock music of the 70s and 80s, as well as had many #1 albums of his own throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, late 60s, 70s, 80s. Who died recently, and I'm still like processing that right now. I can't even make it to Prince, y'all, because I'm still so bent out of shape about David Bowie. Honest to goodness, I've had Purple Rain in my DVR for like 6 months or however long it's been. But to answer your question, he's an amazing dude. He's been in some movies. He has very many albums. He has production credits on even more stuff, and he just is an amazing artist. The Thin White Duke was a particularly like disgusting time in his history, a very drug-addled, cocaine-addled time in his history. Brought out some like deep, gross paranoia in him, and that is the kind of character that he was inhabiting in his musical career at the time of 1976. So he features in here quite a bit around that time, but I do not have nice things to say about that version of David Bowie, really.
So along those same lines, while we're on David Bowie, I looked in here, did you make an inference that David Bowie was associated with David Duke?
Did I? I don't recall that. I definitely, well, you know, David Duke is a neo-Nazi who lives in present-day America, and David Bowie inadvertently got embroiled in some Nazi-based controversy one time in Europe. There's a photograph of him where he's like sitting on the back of a car and he's doing a wave, and there's a moment where the wave like gets to that precise hail maneuver. And so then everybody was like, oh my God. And then they asked him about it, and his answer was like not to apologize, but actually to be sort of flippant about like how stupid do you have to believe that I would be into that. My whole music is about like outsider culture and lifting up rebels and marginalized people in society. How on earth could you think that that was me? But in truth, he didn't handle it super well, and he ultimately never apologized for it. So for a long time, there was like just, you know, sort of silly controversy surrounding it. The essay in the book focuses more on what it means that anyone could believe that about David Bowie. I'm not so concerned. There's no way to know, like, whether he felt those feels or thought those thoughts at the time, right? Probably he did not. That would be my personal wager and my profoundest wish for him. But so much of his audience was briefly alienated by that, and the essay in the book considers what it means about David Bowie's fan base that we would consider that even a possibility that he would do that.
Right. That's what I want to believe too.
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Do you think that maybe it was the American audience that was most offended?
Oh, yes.
And
Unquestionably.
expecting, an apology, because I think maybe it's not a European way to handle conflicts.
Agreed.
You do something and then you don't really apologize. I mean, it's not expected of you to
Agreed.
apologize as long as it is somewhat clear. But in the United States, I've noticed that people expect you to apologize.
Yeah.
So it's different, you know, it was European, so, you know.
Totally. That was just like the tiny snippet of news that came back to us, and we were suddenly like, ah. The same is true of even people who have like possibly genuine Nazi sympathizing tendencies. You know, like Lemmy Kilmister of Motorhead has before he died, a huge collection of Nazi paraphernalia that he always maintained was not a part of his ideology, but he never could really explain why he kept collecting all that stuff. And in Europe, he was huge and was never called upon to explain or justify why he had like a huge collection of SS gear in his personal stuff. But in America, all the time, we ask him about that, we think about, well, before he died, we ask him about that and we think about that and we criticize that. So the Nazi problem is in some ways distinctly American lately, it seems to me. It's strange, right? Now, with the rise of all kinds of shenanigans and a wide variety of leadership positions in Europe, maybe we'll start seeing some circling back on that, maybe, but at least as it pertains to the affiliation between Nazi ideology and rock and roll, it's definitely a uniquely American obsession. Mm-hmm.
So the Ramones, that was a rock group?
The Ramones, yeah. What the Sex Pistols are to the UK, the Ramones are to the US. They basically got started like within the same 2 or 3 months of each other, both in 1976. And they were just these like private school educated white kids from the outer boroughs of New York. And they just hated everything about, like, they needed to get out of the suburbs. And so they made this music that was crazy up-tempo music that loved B-movies and French fries and cheap beer and, you know, jokes about axe murder in your parents' basement. And they just were so weird and tried really hard kind of to alienate everybody and to get back to like that 50s kind of greaser, rebellious vibe. And they were really successful at it for a super long time. Yeah.
What sparked the idea for you to write a retrospective book, especially about 1976?
The more I write, the more I think that I should just stick to what I'm good at. And at some point in the not too distant past, it occurred to me that I'm pretty good at portraits. I have a book about Andy Warhol. I'm working on a book about Bruce Springsteen right now. And I thought, what would it be like to do a portrait of time? And I thought, oh, that's just a history book. Okay, let me think on, can I do a history book? And then I thought, if I were to do a history book, what, you know, it should be a year. That makes some good sense. You know, there's a little bit of literary precedent for that. So what would it be like to do a year, and what year would it be? And so I started with the idea that I was born in 1981, and I might like to know something about what life was like in the cultural soup immediately before I was born. Like what was happening right before I was born, you know, like what was I walking into, kind of, you know. So then I had sort of said it's got to be between 75 and 80 if I'm going to do a book like that. And based on my Warhol research, I had already collected like a vast number of unusual anecdotes and thoughts about artists in 76 and 77. And when I decided that I wanted to focus on punk rock, it was sort of like, well, 76 is where it's at. And then I was like, oh, 76 is the bicentennial. That seems huge. So now I have my big theme, my big independence theme. And I got punk rock, which is major. And I live in Georgia. So then like a little Carter in there. And then when those few dots got connected, then I was like, oh, well, here it is. Let's get started. Thanks. How much of it was primary? Does listening to David Bowie's album myself count as primary research? God, my instinct is to say 0% primary. I like the internet. It's in my house, you know? And so to be able to be in my house and not really have to pay anybody to explain things to me, and for me to just spend all summer reading about whatever I feel like reading about, yeah, man, I sat at my computer with my spreadsheets and just was sort of, I started honestly in the worst place, which is Wikipedia. And I just went through and made a list of, for every month, I had a spreadsheet. And then it had all the days going down the side. And then it had columns for political developments, pop culture developments, births and deaths, all kind of anything. I had columns upon columns. And for every day of the year, I just went through Wikipedia and combed for every album that got released. every politician that got elected, every election that was held, every treaty that was signed, every UN resolution that was made. You know, so I cherry-picked my areas of interest based on things I care about, you know, politics, music primarily. And then I just went through and found all the bedrock facts, like this album existed at this moment in time. Then I would go through each month of the spreadsheet and kind of figure out, all right, well, Love Joan Jett, got to cover that. Soweto riots, super important, nobody talking about that anymore. And then I would kind of piece together like, all right, here are the 6 topics that I want to hit in the April chapter, in the June chapter. And then from there I would do deep dive on, let me go back and check out all my Joan Jett albums. Let me watch that dumb movie, The Runaways again, you know, so then I would pick up primary sources and more secondary sources. Did I call Joan Jett and say, hey, I would like an interview with you? No, sir, I did not. No, sir, I did not. Maybe next time. Maybe if this book sells a bajillion copies, then the next time I would like to write a book about 1977 or something, people will pick up the phone. But for now, I know my place, and I just really wanted to give my 12 cents about all the things. So that didn't really require a lot of primary research.
I think it was Ford, you said, who go to the doctor in the morning. Why do you think he's going to?
Well, sometimes for 1 minute, right? That's got to be a vitamin or injection, and that's all. I don't know how often he's like obligated to check in with his doctor.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're the president, like probably they keep pretty tight tabs on what your body is up to, I would think. But I don't know. That's like top secret security stuff, right? So all we have left is this diary that we can speculate on.
How long was the project from the time you started to the time you completed?
Oh, blessed be summer vacation. I did all the outlining in one summer, so I filled that whole spreadsheet with all the things that I could write about. And then at the very end of the summer, I started highlighting which of these things do I want to cover. And then I drafted a timeline for myself that took about, I had planned to write it in 3 years. So like a third, and I did it chronologically as well. So then I would set up assignments for myself, like the January chapter is about Bob Dylan. Number 1, get Bob Dylan's album from 1976. Number 2, read everything there is to read about Bob Dylan. Not everything, that's a lot of things. But, you know, so then I started doing it piece by piece, and man, in the school, I'm a teacher, it's so hard. I can't just go home and crank out 2K on Bob Dylan, you know, it's not happening. So during the school year, I would do a lot of the reading. And then on Saturday, I would just sit down for 6 hours and just jam out whatever I thought there was to jam out without regard for like fact checking or anything, just all the opinions. And then I would go back and the next weekend maybe like insert the facts where I had not remembered them correctly. So I was using that method for the first year. Summer break arrived and I was on the June chapter, and I had planned, oh, this is serendipitous. It'll be June, July, August, and I'll complete June, July, and August in the summer. I'll speed it up just a little bit. And then, I don't know, I hit some sort of like freaky plateau where I was like, no, I can see all the things from here. It was like being in the Matrix, and I just finished the whole book in 1 summer. Yeah. It seems crazy now, even when I think about it. You know, and I sometimes go back and I look at like October or November, and they don't feel rushed, but they also feel far away. Like, some of these chapters at the end, I did them all in one day. I would sit for 12 hours. My back would be killing me. I finally ponied up for like a really nice office chair because I would just sit in my chair for 12 hours a day. But yeah, 1 or maybe 2 of these chapters was written in one 12-hour stretch, you know? And so that seems crazy even to me. And I go back and I look at it and I'm like, this is amazing. I wrote this? It has a like a distant, far away type of feel to it. So it ended up being a little over 2 years that it took me to write it. I had planned for a full extra year to do it, but fortunately or unfortunately, I didn't need it.
So is that Blood on the Tracks? Is that the Bob Dylan album that came out?
No, nope. Desire. Desire.
Blood on the Tracks. Sorry, guys. That was the year I was a senior in college, 76, 77.
Yeah.
Okay, so listening to that, it's like, yeah, I know, I'm that old. It was like flashback to my youth, you know, and that's, I'm thinking, Blood on the Tracks. No, you're right, that was earlier. That was my sophomore year.
Right on.
Anyway, thank you. It was fun to transfer back in time.
Can I ask you a question? When you say you were sitting for 12 hours in your chair to write,
Yeah.
but then it did not stop there. I mean, obviously you go back and you revise, right?
No. No. Okay, so I'm 35 years old, and I've written 7 books and edited 1. And in order to do that and put one out basically every year since I was the same age as most of you all, you can't really sit on it and like let it germinate and be special and perfect. A lot of the people that raised me wrote primarily in the 80s and 90s, where it was like you really just like dished it out as soon as you could get it while it was hot, you know? Or this even goes back to like Frank O'Hara wrote a poem at lunch every day, and then he would take them to the Mimeo and they would be out by the time the day was over. And Frank did not sit on these poems for more than an hour or two until he got off work, you know? And so I just, although I respect people who can take great care, I take my care on the front end with the thinking part and not so much on, is this the perfect adjective, or can I use the thesaurus and have 7 more adjectives and patiently cogitate for 2 more weeks until I decide which of those 7 adjectives belongs in that sentence. For me, it's really first thought, best thought. So I'll for sure revise for like either factual inaccuracy or grammatical error, but seldom do I spend much time thinking about whether a nicer adjective would have done. Honestly. There are a lot of people who write the other way. Probably the vast majority of fancy award-winning writers write that way, but I'm happy. So, you know, it feels fresher and newer to me. The book doesn't take so long to come out that I don't believe that any of it's mine anymore. It still feels like right there that I'm carrying it around. In part because I don't look at it and think, oh, that other adjective didn't turn out so well. I should have gone with my first thought. I just let it be, and it feels much more organic in situations like this where I'm reading it. I still feel very close to most of it. Mm-hmm.
You say you wrote 7 books. What was your journey like getting your first book published?
It sucked. Yeah. I was in graduate school. It was just my MFA thesis. And I had applied to a couple of contests, which at like $40 a pop, $60, $80 a pop, or whatever for those contest fees, a copy of the winning book or whatever, gets pretty tired pretty quickly. So I submitted to a few small presses, one small press that had a magazine that I had some work selected for. And I sort of flagged like, hey, you published me before, just these 2 poems. Now they're in this full-length collection. Interested? Ah. And they were like, that sounds great. And they were enthused, and then I was enthused, and I was really happy about it. And then there was, you know, trouble in the production process, and I never signed any contract, which is just like a stupid rookie mistake that was like, yeah, always sign things. I know it sucks and is scary to sign things, but get something on paper, get something for real written down about what the plan of action is going to be. To this day, I've never seen a penny off of that book. And, you know, maybe only 10 copies were bought, so I don't deserve a penny, but maybe not. I don't know. So, yeah, we struggled over the book design, font choice, because that's nerdy stuff that I kind of care about, that I would have liked to have input on, that I didn't, because I didn't sign anything. And so, yeah, when it came out, I just cried and cried. Nothing was perfect, nothing was right. And then I got over myself and wrote another book.
I don't want to say vindicated, but how did you feel when Dylan mentioned this?
Oh, Christ. I've been trying really hard to, I am of 2 very strong minds about that. 2 very strong minds. And I have been trying to reserve my final opinion until we hear Dylan give his speech accepting the award, because laureates are obligated within 6 months of being given the award to make a speech about it, or the award can be rescinded. Now, I don't know if the Nobel Committee would actually rescind Bob Dylan's Nobel Prize for Literature or not. That's what I said on the day that it happened, that I would try to reserve judgment. And with every day that goes by, I become a little more cynical about the stupidity of giving Bob Dylan the award, frankly. I mean, look, he's like a super cranky old white guy with like 1,000 albums that a lot of people feel very deeply changed the culture in America and abroad. And I get that. And so in some ways, he's exactly the same as 3/4 of everybody else who's ever won the Nobel Prize for Literature, you know? It's like, I'm sure Philip Roth is like sitting in his New York apartment being like super mad about it. But Philip Roth and Bob Dylan are in some ways the same dude as far as the Nobel Committee is concerned, as far as their ability to be discerning is concerned, you know. And so it's a mainstreaming award. They gave it to a grumpy white guy, and you know, he's a musician. He doesn't write literature. Are songs literature? Yeah, probably. Should we be giving them the award for literature at the level of the Nobel? No, probably not, because like, you know, Philip Roth feels left out in the cold. And that's kind of silly and ridiculous. Why should a guy like that ever feel left out in the cold? But at the same time, like, oh, can another actual writer of books ever win that award again? Or should we also give it to Bruce Springsteen? Should we, I mean, Woody Guthrie, although has to be somebody who's alive, right? So not Woody Guthrie. But yeah, but you know, like if we open it up to a definition that includes albums, which generally as a philosophical idea I'm in favor of, like genre busting, I'm down for some genre busting infinitely. Music and literature should be the same thing. But now, can an author of actual books ever win that award again? I don't know. I don't know what sort of like bogus precedent it sets, but the whole Nobel thing is bogus anyway. It's all bogus anyway. So, you know, let them have it, that's cool. But also, really? You know, I'm of two minds. I would really very much like to hear his speech about it, but in the interim, where he has very expressly kind of not acknowledged that he's gotten the award. You know, just finally on his website, earlier this week, there's like a little note on the shop page that says like, winner of the Nobel Prize, which is the only acknowledgement that anyone in his estate has given to the fact that he's won the award so far. I'm sort of like, you couldn't pick up the phone. You know they told him the same day. Of course they told him the same day. It's a freaking Nobel Prize. It's a big deal. It's supposed to be a big deal, right? So he couldn't pick up the phone and be like, thanks, I'll be there. He couldn't give him that much. He couldn't tell the assistant to the intern to call him up and say like, sure, we'll schedule something. Hold on to that thought a minute. You know, it just, I mean, his response feels rude, frankly. And I know he's Bob Dylan and that's like what he's into, being all mysterious and silent and unavailable and stuff, but come on. Is it a big deal or is it not a big deal? It's supposed to be a big deal, right? I feel very disillusioned and cranky about the whole thing, frankly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll change the topic for you. In February, did Hugh Hefner really get an NAACP award? What?
Yeah, that's real. What? Yes, Hugh Hefner, the publisher of Playboy, won an NAACP award. Yeah.
Unreal.
I don't know. I mean, he thinks of himself as like a real serious feminist. And I think he probably has done a lot of work on behalf of increasing, this is a terrible pun, increasing exposure for African Americans during the time, you know. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what their thinking was. I wasn't there. I tried to find his acceptance speech and I couldn't find it. But I was interested in that for a while, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you have in mind your intended audience while you were writing the book?
You guys. No, I mean, no. I knew that I like to write books that I would like to read. And there's maybe 15 or 20 people that I can count on reliably to read my work and tell me where to stick it. And so I write for those 20 people pretty much.
Where do you tell you where to stick it?
A history teacher I used to work with, 2 of my professors from graduate school, my mom, those people. I will say that I've been more and more trying to write work that is accessible to a large number of people. So maybe I don't keep an audience in mind, but I'm just aware of wanting an audience that is broader than the audience that I first started with. Because when I started as a poet, I wrote very like abstract, thinky, white space-alicious type crazy experimental pieces. And that's for like 10 people. That's not really, or graduate students. That's not really for anybody who's like being a janitor, driving a train. It's not really for those people. And I wanted literature that was a little more of interest to a general audience. So I'm headed in that direction, but that's not a specific group really, just a broader group.